Formula One on 5 Live.
Hello and a very warm welcome to Hungary. Formula One is back in Budapest this weekend for the 13th round of the season. We're just 12 miles northeast of Budapest at the Hungaroring, home to the Hungarian Grand Prix for the last 39 years. A track with a mix of low, medium speed corners, sharp changes of direction with 14 corners, 6 to the left and 8 to the right. And ahead of us, qualifying with clouds gathering and rain coming down on the circuit. The temperatures have cooled. Could that put even more of a twist into the tail of this 2024 Formula One season? My name is Harry Benjamin, and alongside me, guiding you through all the coverage this weekend, is former McLaren F1 mechanic Mark Priestley. Mark, we didn't have rain down. We didn't talk about that this morning.
That wasn't on the agenda today, was it?
There was already so much unpredictability with McLaren looking good, so too Mercedes. We haven't seen the full cards yet from Red Bull. And now it's light rain, but it has been coming down consistently over the last 20 minutes or so.
Yeah, we got a grandstand full of people with umbrellas up, so there's enough for that. And look, we'll take it, won't we? I mean, it is exciting enough without the rain, but that's another element. No one's been on wet weather tyres yet this weekend. It's going to be unpredictable. The surface, even if it doesn't rain heavily from now on into the session, the surface is going to be slippery, greasy, definitely very different to what they left off just a couple of hours ago at the end of FP3. So, yeah, a lot of excitement to come, I'd say.
Well, also with us is the BBC's F1 correspondent, Andrew Benson. Andrew, well, yeah, the rain has been coming down. The track's certainly damp. Already the drivers have learnt so much from the 3 practice sessions, but nobody has had any wet weather running so far. So what does this do for qualifying?
Well, Harry, it's just a new element of uncertainty, isn't it? It's not actually that wet. It's been raining a bit for a while. It started about an hour ago. I first felt it on my sensitive rain detector, otherwise known as my bald head. And then it got a bit heavier. The track's definitely damp. But if it doesn't, I can see even if it continues to rain at this level, it could easily dry up enough to have slicks. And the FIA's forecast is that it will stop altogether in about 20 minutes or so time. So this first session particularly, I would imagine, is going to be very hectic, and then it's just going to be a question of how quickly the track dries, when you have to change from one type of tyre to the other, what kind of mistakes might happen. The curbs are going to be slippery. It's a whole new dimension that the drivers are going to have to face now.
Yeah, it certainly is. And even in the grandstands, which have been absolutely packed all weekend long, still a few umbrellas up, but not masses. A couple actually coming down. So it is light rain, but let's see when we get Q1 underway what drivers make of these new circumstances they find the Hungaroring. It's only been a couple of hours since FP3. And at the end of FP3, Mark, well, it was advantage McLaren. Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri with some brilliant pace on display. That's going to give them confidence, but it's tight at the top.
Really tight, and it's it's not a long lap here. It's one of the shorter circuits, generally sort of lower to medium speed, a couple of high speed corners thrown in as well, but it's not a long lap, and that means that the gaps between drivers, because there literally isn't very much space to stretch out a lead, the gaps tend to be too small, and that's what we saw. So yes, it was McLaren at the top of the timesheets, but the gaps behind them weren't very large, and you could say that all the way down the field. Mercedes came back into play earlier on today as temperatures began to lower. That seemed to suit their car and the way it handles tyres, so they were in the mix. We definitely haven't seen the best of Max Verstappen yet, with a major upgrade on his car, so he'll be up there or thereabouts, I'm sure, as well. And the Ferrari, particularly in the hands of Sainz, but also Leclerc as well, just about around that area too, so it's all to play for.
And many Lando Norris fans in the grandstand holding up signs. Lando, bring back the champagne pop, hoping he gets on to the podium. Let's hope he doesn't break a trophy this time around, if he does indeed get onto the podium for a second year in a row at the Hungarian Grand Prix. But before we get to the race, we've got to go qualifying. This is how the Drivers' and Constructors' Championship shapes up ahead of the 13th round of the season. Max Verstappen leads the charge in the Drivers', 255 points for him. He's 84 clear of Lando Norris. Then it's the 2 Ferraris of Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz. Oscar Piastri is 5th, with Sergio Perez falling down to 6th place. And then in the Constructors' Championship, it is Red Bull who lead the way, 373 points. They are 71 points ahead of Ferrari. McLaren just a further 7 points behind them. Then it's Mercedes and Aston Martin, the top 5. RB is 6th ahead of Haas. Then it's Alpine and Williams, with Sauber 10th and last, the only team yet to get off the mark. mark as cars begin to peel out of their garages into the pit lane and make their way down towards the pit lane entry. And I'm spying a couple of slick tyres there, so they're not feeling it's wet enough for Inters.
I think they're all on slicks at this point. It is drying out. We're already seeing sort of dry sections of the racetrack, and it will not take very long at all, with a couple of Formula One cars going around at speed to create a very, very dry line. So you can't afford to be on even intermediate tyres when the circuit is this dry. Even if it's damp, it will quickly destroy intermediates. So get a little bit of temperature in there, start to dry out the circuit at the same time, and the slick tyres, as everybody begins to roll out of this garage on the softs, the fastest of the 3 compounds available, they will be the ones to be on, and they will be the ones that generate most grip as we get temperature into them.
Yeah, in terms of tyres, Pirelli have brought the softest in the range this weekend. The C3 is the hard, the C4 is the medium, and the C5 is the soft tyre, which every car that is heading out onto the circuit, which has now begun, Q1 has now started, is on that soft tyre. Ricciardo, Albon, Hülkenberg, Tsunoda, Bottas, Sargent, Joe, Gasly, Magnussen, all filing out of the pit lane now. So not too much waiting around. Everybody wants to get out on the track and try and dry it up as much as possible before we then start to see fast laps coming. And that's the thing, it will be, here's Bottas.
Yeah, track is okay for slick. Copy.
So Bottas in the Sauber confirming that the track is okay for slick tyres. But of course what will happen is the track in the early stages at least will get quicker and quicker. So those first lap times are not going to be enough. We're going to have to keep going in this session.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, assuming we believe that there is no more rain, and I think that, as Andrew said, was the prediction. So I guess, there's an element of how confident are we? There's not another little shower around the corner. This is a circuit that's nestled sort of into the hills. You can get cloud rolling in pretty quickly. It can change at the drop of a hat. So I suppose it's worth getting a banker lap in. It's also, the circuit will have changed in terms of its grip level since this morning. So just getting out there, getting a driver a feel for it. If you need to make any tiny balance changes to things like the front wing flap levels, for example, you can do that and you still get out, have another run when the circuit's at its optimum in a few minutes' time.
Nico Hülkenberg, one of the first to embark on his flying lap off the back of 2 top 10 appearances, qualified and started the race in 9th in Austria and a fantastic 6th in Silverstone. Followed that up with 2 6th place finishes for Haas, which is really helping them in the constructors' charge. Hülkenberg, who will be departing the team at the end of the year and joining Sauber ahead of its Audi Works project in 2026, slams on the brakes for the 90-degree right-hander of turn 12, makes his way then through the long arcing left-hander of 13 before he makes his way slightly uphill round the right-hander, which shadows the pit lane entry all the way around to the right and across the line. Hülkenberg's lap is a 1:20.585.
So we're still, 4 seconds off what was a quick dry lap time earlier on. And one of the biggest challenges at this point is that whilst the circuit, the tarmac itself, is already very quickly developing a completely dry line, the curbs hold a little bit of water and they're a bit of an unknown. There's a lot of these corners where you do need to drift out wide into curbs.
We think there could be 1 lap before the rain, so suggest strap 2. Strap 2 could be some rain after you've done 1 lap.
So Oscar Piastri's radio reporting that, more rain could be on the way.
Well, that's exciting, isn't it? I mean, we thought that might be it for the weather playing a part, but maybe not. So that's why we're seeing everybody rushing out. Just to finish what I was saying, the curbs can hold water. They're serrated curbs, a lot of them around this racetrack. You need to run out onto those curbs to get the lap time. And if they're wetter than the tarmac itself, you can immediately lose grip. So that's a challenge that they're all trying to tiptoe their way around right now and figure out. But this could be their one opportunity then, particularly in Q1, to get the driest conditions possible.
Yeah, going to have to get that banker lap in if McLaren's radar is to be believed, with more rain on the way, and the times are tumbling with every car that crosses the line. Logan Sargent has just gone fastest by 0.6 of a second, a 1:17.770. Alonso has just slotted into second. Norris is fastest in the middle sector. This is the sound of Oscar Piastri in the other McLaren, and making his way through the left-hander of turn 12. You can see a few raindrops flying off of his visor as we ride on board with the visor camera, but round the final corner to the line for Oscar Piastri. Fastest time so far in Q1. But what has Lando Norris got? He hasn't got enough in these early stages. Piastri fastest with a 1:17.5. Norris a 1:17.7.
Yeah, and Carlos Sainz will be the next man to cross the line. Then a Ferrari going very, very quickly. Lewis Hamilton also on a quick lap behind him. So you need to be out early. As we've heard, you've got to be out early in this early part of the session. Sainz now tops the timesheets. Then it'll be Hamilton, who's gone fastest of anybody in the first sector in his Mercedes. So things are changing very, very quickly. And if this is the best of conditions, you need to be on track right now.
Verstappen currently in 5th. Perez has just gone up to 6th as well. But it's Hamilton who is fastest of anybody. Fastest in the Sector 1, fastest in Sector 2. Needs to keep it all planted together. And nobody is really slipping and sliding too much. So the track very much ready, was ready for slicks as all the drivers came out on the soft tyre. Round the final corner, a few sparks fly for Hamilton as he runs out wide, but it's the fastest lap time so far, a 1:17.087 for the 7-time champion.
Yeah, good lap from Lewis. That's a nice banker that should see him safely through if conditions deteriorate from here. Max Verstappen is on a lap that's started quite well but deteriorated since then, so I wonder if he's missed the boat here, missed the opportunity. He's currently sitting in 6th at the moment, and if things of course don't improve, there's a yellow flag in Sector 1 as well, so if things don't improve, we may well see nobody else getting better and the current situation staying as it is.
Yeah, yellow flag in Sector 1. On our radar, it looks like Logan Sargent has stopped. It's now a green flag, but those who went through the yellow flag would have had to have lifted on that run. Just seeing Sargent rejoining the track on the exit of Turn 1. Haven't seen why he went off, but I tell you, if we are going to get more rain, then the likes of, well, George Russell down in 15th, who just has a bit of a slide coming out of the right-hander of Turn 12, needs to get a bit of a hurry on. So too Charles Leclerc, who has just started another fast lap. He's down in 16th. Daniel Ricciardo is in 17th. Out of Hulkenberg, Gasly and Joe. They are all at the moment at risk of being eliminated. It is still early stages here. 11 minutes and 11 seconds remaining. Russell goes through into 11th. Doesn't actually make up a huge amount of time on that lap. Albon crosses the line in 8th.
Yeah, and that lap from George Russell could be a sign that we've seen the best of these conditions now, because that was a lap where George was on the limit. It is still raining, and George could only put in a lap quick enough to be 11th. Charles Leclerc is still in the drop zone. He is on a lap that's a massive lock-up from Logan Sargent.
Oh, he hit the wall.
He's hit the wall at Turn 1. Went straight on at the end of the start-finish straight. Locks all 4 tyres, I think, at one point. Standing so heavily on the brakes. Coming down the main straight, you can hear him now. Jumps on the brakes too late. Both fronts lock up, and he goes straight on as a passenger. Gently kisses the wall.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm not sure the car is.
That was Logan Sargent reporting on the radio. He did manage to get out of the wall and rejoin the track, and he is actually still out there, but I think he's making his way slowly round to the pit lane. But the rain is coming down a little harder than it was, and lap times, well, some aren't improving, some are. Charles Leclerc on for a personal best. Verstappen improves the best of anybody in the middle sector, fastest of anyone. Leclerc across the line. He gets himself up into 9th with 10 minutes to go on Q1. This is the sound of Max Verstappen round the final corner in the Red Bull, running a big upgrade this weekend. Verstappen to the line, loses time in that final sector, 3rd. I wonder if that's where the rain is coming down slightly harder throughout the lap, but Perez has had a shocker over middle sector.
Yeah, he has. Not improving then, Sergio Perez. He's down in 8th at the moment, and it all depends on the level of this rain and how it continues. We'll see how he finishes out the lap, but Perez's middle sector was pretty poor, as you said. He crosses the line. No improvement from Sergio Perez, so he's 2 seconds off the pace. A lot of it lost in the middle sector, but if conditions deteriorate now, we've got a situation where the bottom 5 are currently Stroll, Magnussen, Zhou Guanyu, Hulkenberg and Gasly, and out of those, you definitely say Hulkenberg deserves to be way higher up than that.
Yeah, Magnussen has also looked fairly quick so far this weekend. Gasly is currently 20th and last. He's just rounding the final corner now. He does improve and gets himself up into 11th. That puts Daniel Ricciardo down into 16th spot and very much at risk of elimination. Stroll comes into the pits. Both Haas drivers are in the pits. Zhou Guanyu still out on track, but he might be coming into the pits at the end of this lap. Esteban Ocon finding a bit more time. He's down in 13th. George Russell is going again. Just over 8.5 minutes on the clock, and we are really trying to keep a fine eye over where this weather is heading, because it seems to be ebbing and flowing. It's not an absolute deluge deluge of heavy rain, but it's clearly enough to find the middle sector, which George Russell is just having to slightly teeter through, and we'll see his sector times, and I don't think they're going to look very good, because Russell is coming through the middle sector where there is the majority of the rain.
Yeah, the sound you can hear is George Russell's car. He just got a little bit of wheel spin, came out the chicane, tried to bury the throttle, the back end stepped away, and he had to overcorrect, and that effectively ruined that lap. So there is still time, as you said, just under 8 minutes still on the clock. There's actually time, if the rain stops now, for it to completely dry up, and we could still see lap times dramatically improve. So there's enough time here for things to still change.
So at the moment it's Hamilton fastest then, ahead of Sainz, Verstappen, Piastri, Alonso is fifth, ahead of Norris, Logan Sargent before he slid into the wall is seventh fastest, Perez and Leclerc and Ocon the top 10, then it's Albon, Gasly, Tsunoda, Russell and Bottas the top 15, and right now if it ended like this they would all progress through into Q2 and out would go Daniel Ricciardo in 16th ahead of Stroll, Magnussen, Joe and Hülkenberg, but we do still have 7 minutes and 17 seconds on the clock. Lando Norris is back out there. The first sector seems okay in terms of managing the rain, but then you're just losing time in the middle and the final sector where it starts to get a little heavier. Lando Norris not improving on that last time around. Charles Leclerc does actually find a little bit of time, slots himself up into 8th spot, but it's that middle sector that is proving most tricky.
Yeah, it's that tricky time of the session where here's Verstappen quickly.
No, I don't think we can improve like this.
What's your concern, the temperatures or the...
The rain!
Okay, calm down, Max. Then if you're concerned about the rain, we can box. You can come back to the garage, it's not a problem. You were talking to me about tyre temps.
Well, concern on one side of the garage for Max Verstappen, even bigger concern on the other side. Red flag, because there is a huge crash for Sergio Perez, who finds himself off on turn 8 that's coming into the middle sector, and for a man who is under the most amount of pressure he has ever been for his career, this is the last thing he needed. A crash in the first part in qualifying. He has said he's okay on the radio, he's taken his steering wheel out, but the rear end of that car very much damaged. This is the sound of Sergio Perez. He's heading uphill towards the chicane, chucks it into the right, then the left, gets on the power, into the left-hander, round he goes, into the wall.
These crashes seem so pathetically slow. It's not one of the fastest sections of the racetrack, but he got on the curbs, which you do have to do. We said earlier on the quickest lap time is over the curbs. He stepped a rear wheel onto it and just lost all traction. The curbs will always be more slippery than the tarmac itself. They're often quite highly polished, different material. They hold onto that water. But that for Sergio Perez, I mean, that could well be. I mean, I don't think there was anything he could have done over these next 2 races, in my own opinion, to save his career at Red Bull. But that, if there was anybody sitting on the fence, well, that is the thing that may well have just nailed the coffin shut.
And the Red Bull fans in the grandstand with an equal look of concern. Sergio Perez does step rather gingerly out of the car, but is now making his way into the Aston Martin medical car. And disappointment on all the faces on Perez's side of the Red Bull garage, at a time where, yes, he has that contract extension, signed a few races ago, but with this slump of performance for Sergio Perez, who has been eliminated in the first part of qualifying in the 3 of the last 5 Grand Prix, hasn't had a top 6 finish in a Grand Prix in the last 7 races. Right now, he's 9th, but he won't be participating in any more of qualifying.
No, he won't. And the problem with that is, there's a number of problems with this, obviously. The team have got a huge rebuild on their hands. It's a number of upgrades on that car. All right, Perez doesn't have the full upgrade package that Verstappen has, so a lot of those parts that might be in short supply, I guess, are still safe on Verstappen's car. But there were new components like floors on this car. They've all been damaged in this crash. It's a heavy impact into the wall, particularly with the left-hand side of the car. He goes round, and yeah, front and rear slam heavily into the wall. So there's a huge amount of damage. But the other part of this is that he will now start the race, of course, in a position that's quite a long way back from where the performance of that car should be. It's not the easiest racetrack to overtake on, so he's probably going to get a poor race result as well. And you can look at it and go, well, it's difficult conditions, these things happen. They do happen, but they don't happen to Verstappen. And that's what everybody will be saying here. Why is it that these little accidents, these mistakes are not happening on Verstappen's side, they're only happening on Sergio's side? And that'll be the question that even he will have to ask himself, because we talked earlier on about confidence playing a part. It may well have just played a part there, but whether it was or wasn't, that crash will only have dented his confidence further.
Yeah, it is. You feel for him. It's the last thing he needed. Red flag out in qualifying, and in qualifying, when there's a red flag, the time stops. So 6 minutes and 45 seconds still on the clock. And actually, the rain is now coming down harder. So how the state of play this is going to be, well, they're going to have to go out on wet tyre, on the intermediate tyres. So no one's going to improve on their lap times unless it dramatically dries up in the next few moments. But this is buying time for a couple of drivers to make a few changes, particularly Logan Sargent, who did have a bit more of a softer hit against the wall. A lot of work going on the front nose of Logan Sargent's Williams to try and get that repaired in time, because at the moment he'd be looking to go through to Q2. Well,
if you're Sergio Perez, you're going to be desperately hoping the rain gets worse, because if nobody can improve, he may at least still start inside the top 10, which, if the track suddenly changes and the conditions get better, he could find his way all the way down right back inside the bottom, the last 5 here.
Well, if it didn't improve now, we'd get Q2 underway, and then he'd be, what, 15th at best?
Top 15. But he wouldn't be eliminated necessarily in Q1, which he could easily find himself eliminated if the rain stops and the track gets quicker. So it could be perhaps a one saving grace for him, but ultimately he'll be feeling awful this afternoon as he leaves that car.
Is that going to be the defining picture that showcases the end of Sergio Perez's Red Bull career?
Well, it's just another defining picture, unfortunately. Brutal though that sounds, if this was a one-off, you go, God, that's shocking, that's terrible, it could be the last thing he does, of any meaning at Red Bull. It's not a one-off. These kind of things have happened regularly. They've always been, or almost always been, driver error. It's got the hallmarks of someone who's desperately trying too hard to match a teammate that's just quicker than him. And when you try too hard, you overstep the mark, you breach the limits, and these are the results.
Well, if you are just joining us then, this is qualifying for the Hungarian Grand Prix, and with 6 minutes and 45 seconds stopped on the clock, that is because of a red flag due to a crash for Sergio Perez, the Red Bull driver. He is out of the car, but dipping a wheel onto a slightly wetter part of the track, spun that Red Bull around, coming through into turn 8, and he found the wall and heavily damaged his car. He is out of the car, back in the pit lane now as the marshals get to work in retrieving the Red Bull and also repairing the tyre barrier too. And now, having started this session damp but good enough for the slick tyre, the rain has been increasing in intensity over the last 10 or so minutes. And when we do get this session restarted, if we do get this session restarted, those who are at risk of being eliminated in this first part of qualifying would be Daniel Ricciardo in the RB, who's down in 16th, ahead of Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin, Kevin Magnussen in the Haas, Zhou Guanyu in the Sauber, and Nico Hülkenberg 20th and last in the other Haas. Hamilton has the fastest lap time so far, 1:17.0, ahead of Sainz, Verstappen, Piastri, Alonso, the top 5. Norris, Sargent, who has damaged the wall. Williams now, or has damaged his car after hitting the wall. Williams now frantically trying to make some minor repairs to the front end of that car. He was good enough for 7th ahead of Leclerc. Perez was good enough for 9th, so he could well start 15th if the rain continues to get heavier and heavier and nobody else can improve in this session if we get it restarted. Ocon 10th, Albon, Gasly, Tsunoda, Russell, Bottas, the top 15 currently safe and going through into Q2, but still no word on if and when we will get this session restarted as yet.
No, and just looking at Sergio Perez's car as it's craned away from the scene of the accident, it's quite a lot of damage, particularly at the rear end, and it's a sort of damage because it went in sideways into the wall where you often see a drive shaft sort of punched into the gearbox. You may well find that this could actually become an even greater penalty for Sergio if he ends up having to change major components like that. That could get even worse for him. A message from race control. The session will resume at 16:22 local time. That's about 3 minutes from now.
Good news then. We will get this session back underway. but will anybody go out is the question. Will they dry the track up? If they do, how quickly will they do it? Will the rain cease? And we're getting a couple of helicopter shots, and there is quite a lot of rain clouds in the distance in the mountains beyond. We are in a bit of a valley here, in a natural bowl. We're in an area of Budapest called Mogorod in the Three Springs Valley. It's about 12 miles northeast of Budapest, and having been rather hot and sticky in the first few days, temperatures have slightly cooled today. At the moment, air temperature just over 24 degrees, track temperature just over 29 degrees, but that is not getting too many people down. The fans in the grandstand jumping up and down, enjoying the music, and even a few wry smiles from the Verstappen side of the garage. And the other thing, actually, to think about with Perez and that crash is he's been running a few of the new upgrades. Yeah. So that's then damaged. That's what I was saying. He hasn't got the full upgrade package on that Verstappen has. So in that sense, they're spared a little bit. But there are a lot of new components, especially the floor, which is now absolutely destroyed. So I don't know what their spares stock is like of those components, but you can bet your bottom dollar they will want to keep hold of the things that they need for the likes of Verstappen to make sure he sees his way through this qualifying hour before they decide to give them to Sergio Perez after a situation like that. But look, if the rain stops, if this gets dry, we know that in dry conditions, when everything's normal as it should be, it's very, very close between Lando Norris, Max Verstappen, so McLaren effectively, Verstappen, maybe the Ferraris as well. But in these conditions, when it's cooler, and particularly if it's damp, then you're going to be looking at the likes of Hamilton coming back into play. Their car suits cooler conditions, his experience, the likes of Alonso maybe even as well. Their experience counts for a lot when conditions are anything outside of the normal range. So they'll be relishing, particularly Hamilton, relishing these conditions right now as he currently sits top of the timesheets. Well, before we get this session underway in just under a minute or so, let's get the thoughts of our BBC F1 correspondent, Andrew Benson. Two questions for you, Andrew. Is that Perez done and dusted for good? And you've got the best weather radar of all of us. What's it saying for you?
I'm in the media centre at the moment, Harry, so the sensitive rain detector's not working as well as it was when I was in the paddock earlier. It looks dry, I think. On the subject of Perez, look, Red Bull have got themselves a real conundrum, haven't they? They've kind of reverse engineered the way into it in a way. You know, they've signed about a month ago, just over, they signed Perez to a new 2-year contract. Lots of people in the paddock didn't really understand why they did that. There's talk that they don't want Sainz alongside Verstappen again after the tensions that they had in Toro Rosso when they were rookies in 2015. But, you know, it's been clear for quite some time that Perez really, you know, with the best will in the world, he's not a good enough driver to be in a front-running car. That's the bottom line. The question is, if they're going to drop him, who do they replace him with if mid-season? In the sense that they've got 3 drivers that they can choose from. The 2 RB drivers, Daniel Ricciardo and Yuki Tsunoda, and the reserve driver, Liam Lawson. Now, Red Bull are not convinced by Tsunoda. He's there at RB because at Honda's behest. But Ricciardo was brought back in the hope that he could prove you know, a contender for a Red Bull seat again, but he's been out-qualified 9-3 by Tsunoda so far this year, and at an average of about 1/10 of a second. So are they going to pick either of those two? Well, it's a really difficult call, isn't it? And then Lawson has only done 5 Grand Prix, and many would question the wisdom of putting him in alongside Verstappen. Is it going to be any different than Perez? What do you do in that situation? I honestly don't know. And also, if they do drop Perez, either whether it's mid-season or at the end of the season, then that's massive humble pie and egg on the face for Christian Horner, whose decision it was to sign him again for the next 2 years. So you could see in Horner's body language on the pit wall a few minutes ago, you could almost see those thoughts going through his head. You know, he was looking down, looking distressed, having seen Perez put the car in the barriers. But I mean, I really don't know. If I was in that situation, I really don't know what I would decide. Harry, do you?
Well, Andrew, with just 5 minutes to go, just quickly, what I would say is any of those things is better than what they've got now. Why not roll the dice and try any of those three drivers you mentioned? Because they know what they've got with Perez, and it's not good enough. With half a season to go and nothing really to lose, just put any of them in it.
Yeah, it's a good argument, but then you still have to choose which one, don't you? And that decision is not easy because of the criteria that I laid out. So it's still difficult, even if you decide you have to ditch Perez, and I could see why they would make that call.
It's so tricky, isn't it? But I mean, I'm on your side, Mark. I think if I'm Red Bull boss, I'm putting Tsunoda in for the last half of the season, see how he actually gets on. You give Lawson his shot in the RB team and see how he fares against Daniel Ricciardo, and then you make your full choices come the end of the year, and you've tried everybody out that is next in line. You
could argue it's a luxury position to be able to try two drivers in season that no one else really gets the opportunity to do.
Yeah. Back to the track action then. Thank you very much, Andrew Benson, for your insights. We'll finish off this Q1 session then. It is back underway. 3 minutes and 50 seconds remain, and well, despite it looking like it has rained quite heavily, and George Russell has just said on the radio it's too damp for slicks, it's not causing masses of spray. Some have gone out to try it. The two Saubers, this is the sound of George Russell out there. Carlos Sainz and Lewis Hamilton have also gone out, along with Albon, and that is it. So they are all out on the track, but nobody is improving any kind of lap time, and DRS has been disabled as well, so they're not going to get the added boost. That gives you down to turn 1 and then out towards turn 2 as Russell crosses the line and does not improve his lap time.
Well, George Russell, I think, has just started.
Oh, has he just started one? Sorry.
So Valtteri Bottas, who's right on the cusp, moments of looking quick, but without that DRS, as you say, in the first sector, that's going to cost them reasonably considerably. It depends on which parts of the circuit are wettest and which are driest, whether anyone's going to be able to improve. Zhou Guan Yu is going quicker than he's gotten so far, but I don't think it's going to be enough to trouble anybody outside of the bottom 5. We'll keep a close eye on it. It's coming into the final sector right now. No one else really improving that much.
No. Zhou Guan Yu needs to find something pretty good in this final sector, and it's looking all right, but Russell's out there because he's 14th. So if it did suddenly dry up, all it takes is a Bottas, a Ricciardo, a Stroll, a Zhou, who are all out there to find that extra bit of grip in one sector and to haul themselves up into Q2. Indeed, Russell finds some time in the middle sector. It's still a second off Hamilton's middle sector from earlier on, but he is finding time. Zhou does improve. It gets him off the bottom stop, but it's only 19th as Hülkenberg ventures back out on track. Magnussen's still in the garage, so I wonder whether they're even going to bother down at Haas for K-Mag. Across the line for Russell, it's 10th place, fastest of anybody in the final sector.
Yeah.
So it's dried up in the final sector.
Yeah, that was crucial for George Russell. He's in P10. Things could still change, because what you need now is to have a fully charged battery and cross the line just before the checkered flag comes out. That's when this circuit is going to be at its quickest. We've got 1.5 minutes left on the clock. So really now, if you're on a flying lap now, you are not going to be on track at the quickest point. You need to be on a preparation lap now. The sound you can hear is
one of the Aston Martins.
It's Lance Stroll,
yes,
just preparing himself, doing the right thing, buying some time so that he can cross the line at the last minute with his car fully prepared when the track is at its quickest.
On an outlap at the moment, Tsunoda in 14th, Ricciardo, Stroll, Magnussen has ventured out, so too Hülkenberg, all on outlaps, ready to take their flyer last over the line. I think this could be, particularly in that final sector, as it starts to dry up with just 55 seconds left on the clock. Esteban Ocon, Pierre Gasly have stayed in the pits. Could the two Alpines here be caught out by sudden improvements? Russell is still out on the track in 10th. He will get another shot if he's able to, if he's done enough to cool everything down and recharge the battery. But this is going to be a corker right at the very end of Q1.
Yeah, so Ricciardo's just started his lap. He's got a clear track in front of him. Albon is in the prime position here, just coming up to the line now with about 20 seconds to spare. Total clear track in front. But behind him, a gaggle of almost 10 cars with zero space between them. They are almost certainly going to be coming across traffic as this lap unfolds. We'll have to see with just 10 seconds left. Some of them might even make it.
No, Sargent, Piastri, Magnussen, Norris, they're all on top of each other coming around the final corner now. Verstappen is also just behind with 5 5 seconds to go. Will Verstappen make it over the line to get a final lap in? He's not going to do it. Verstappen just misses out. So too does Oscar Piastri. Verstappen actually finishes his lap and does an identical lap to Lewis Hamilton. But because Hamilton said it first, Verstappen slots into second. Sainz third, takes the checkered flag ahead of Piastri. Alonso takes the flag in fifth. Leclerc improves. He heads up into fourth. On the bubble, Tsunoda 14th. Bottas in 15th. Stroll, who was in the elimination zone, rockets up to fourth.
Yeah, and everybody going quicker now. In the bottom 5, the Bottas is going quicker.
Ricciardo to the top of the times, a 1:17.050 for the RB driver. Gasly now at risk. Tsunoda is finding time in the middle sector. Bottas is trying to improve as well. Magnussen has had a good first sector. Zhou Guanyu on for a decent lap as well. Hülkenberg up into 6th. Tsunoda up into 8th. But what about Zhou? What about Bottas? What about George Russell, who is currently down in 15th and in the pits? He will not get another go. Zhou Guanyu crosses the line. It's enough for 17th. Bottas makes it up into 10th, and that puts Russell out in Q1. Magnussen next across the line. He's currently 20th and last. His teammate is up into 6th. Can K-Mag join him? Only just gets through into 15th by the skin of his teeth. And the big name to fall, the man who set pole position last time out at the British Grand Prix, now finds himself out in the first part of qualifying.
Yeah, disaster for George Russell. That was all about timing. It was about being on the circuit and even at the right point on the circuit at the right moment. And he wasn't able to do that. Norris scraped through. He was actually on a clear lap. I think bailed out in the end because he knew he didn't need to, but just about scraped through in 13th. Sargent makes his way through. Great stuff for him. Perez did in fact fall all the way down to P16 after crashing out earlier in the session.
Out at the end of Q1 then, in what has been an enthralling start to qualifying for the Hungarian Grand Prix. Perez, who crashed out and caused the red flag, heavy damage. The Mexican out of the car though, saying he's okay on the radio. In the end, ending up 16th. George Russell, wrong place, wrong time, caught out by the ever drying conditions, down in 17th. Zhou Guanyu 18th, and the 2 Alpines. And we're just seeing Esteban Ocon walk back to his garage. He is not happy whatsoever. The man, of course, who took his one and only Grand Prix win so far here at this very track back in 2021, down in 19th, ahead of Pierre Gasly in 20th.
Well, we're just talking about who might replace Sergio Perez if they get rid of him at some point throughout this season, and look who's popped in at number 1 on the timesheet at exactly the right moment. Daniel Ricciardo. Look at me, everybody.
What a turnaround that would be at the track where Daniel Ricciardo returned to Formula One this time last year, replacing Nick De Vries, ending that session fastest.
Yeah, sorry about this session, guys. It's on me.
George Russell on the radio there. I mean, pretty magnanimous in that. And to be honest, clearly not slow, but in these conditions, it is about right time. And even that whole gaggle of cars that were in that final sector still managed to get over the line and all improve. In the end, Russell being the biggest name to fall.
Yeah, and you've got to be at the right point on the track at the right time, of course, but then you only get one shot to get it right. We didn't see it, but it sounds like George Russell may have made some kind of mistake, may have run wide or lost some time, down to driver error. So, fair play to him. He's held his hands up and admitted that might be something to do with him rather than blaming it on anyone else. But yeah, you don't get many chances in this sport, as we see over and over again.
Really good effort from Daniel Ricciardo, who ended fastest. So too for Alex Albon, Nico Hülkenberg, Lance Stroll, Yuki Tsunoda, all getting themselves into the top 8. And Bottas, with a heroic final lap, he managed to improve massively to get his Sauber up into the top 10. In fact, Valtteri Bottas has qualified in the top 10 here at the Hungaroring in the last 10 consecutive Grand Prix held here. Could he try and make it number 11 in a car that is pretty much glued to the back of the pack at the moment?
Well, another driver that's fighting for his sort of Formula One life, isn't he? He's looking for a seat. Talk of him on the radar at Williams, of course, to partner alongside Alex Albon next year, doing a good job of making a case for himself. And this is the case we've got. It's the situation we've got, isn't it? Up and down, the sort of from mid-grid backwards, half of them are fighting for seats for next year. And so it does add another element in. And perhaps for some it's pressure, but for others it's that little spark, that bit of motivation they need to just step the game up a little bit. So hopefully that's what we're seeing.
Well, the weather is also changing left, right and centre. In the distance there is still some lingering rain clouds, but it has seemed to have cleared a little more, and the rain ceasing for the time being. So of course everybody went out on the slick tyres in that final part.
I mean, why we're not putting enough fuel in the car to complete the session, guys. Trying to just get better and better.
Okay, well that's interesting. That was George Russell to his engineers. So in qualifying, typically what you do is you'd put some fuel in for maybe one, an out lap, a flying lap and an in lap. Maybe you'd give yourself an extra chance to get 2 runs. But in these conditions, what George is saying, as the circuit's getting quicker, just forget about the fuel weight penalty, fill it up, because the track's getting quicker and quicker. I need to be on the circuit for the whole time, particularly at the right time when it's at its fastest. Maybe that was an oversight between team and driver there, in terms of maybe they were under-fueled and just didn't have enough to be on track when it mattered.
Well, end of Q1 then, as we move towards Q2. The other thing of note is we may well have got out in that final part of qualifying on the slick tyres, but DRS wasn't enabled either. The stewards not deeming it to be a dry track, dry enough for DRS. That has now come up as being re-enabled ahead of the second part of qualifying. Kevin Magnussen absolutely sliding into Q2 by the skin of his teeth, only a couple of hundredths of a second quicker than Sergio Perez's time, but Magnussen will be pleased to get through, along with Logan Sargent, who, having found the wall in Q1, locking up all of his tyres, heading straight into the wall at turn 1. It was actually a fairly light touch, clearly some damage to the front end of that Williams, but with the red flag caused by Sergio Perez, they managed to make a few, or have the time at least to repair the damage done to the front end of that Williams, as we gear up nicely then for the second part of qualifying.
Yeah, here we go. We've got Charles Leclerc, I think that is, rolling out of the Ferrari garage, making his way down to the end of the pit lane. Around about 10 seconds until we get green light now, so he just wants to be out first, get himself into position so that he's got a nice clear track and can make use of these conditions. Yes, you'd expect it to get quicker and quicker and quicker, but as we've seen, the rain can come from anywhere at any moment, and they need to always be aware of that here.
By the way, if you're listening to us on your phone, in your pocket, or you're moving from the car somewhere into the house, the living room, the kitchen, there's now a new way you can listen to our Formula One coverage. If you have a smart speaker, all you have to do is ask it to play the Hungarian Grand Prix. So ask your smart speaker to ask BBC Sounds to play Hungarian Grand Prix qualifying, and then we shall pop up. But you really got to enunciate it to make it work. So magic stuff here, and just a privilege to be able to come to you from all aspects here at the Hungarian Grand Prix. Q2 back underway.
I'll just correct myself, it was Carlos Sainz and not Charles Leclerc making his way out first, so the only man on track right now is the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz, circulating on the soft slick tyres with a circuit that actually looks bone dry from all the areas that we can see so far.
Yeah, it really has dried up very quickly, hasn't it? And Sainz doing everybody a favour and being the guinea pig to head out and just see what it is all about. He's just making his way through the right-hander of turn 9, and then 10, the slight left-hand king that leads you to the arcing right-hander of 11, down the short straight towards turn 12, brake just after the 50-metre braking board into the 90-degree right-hander, and then you just got 2 more corners to come your way. The left-hand loop of turn 13, which leads you towards the pit lane entry, which arcs round to the right. You stay on the racing line and shadow it round the final corner of turn 14 and onto the main straight for Carlos Sainz, who will then begin his first flyer. DRS open, the drag reduction system, the rear wing flies open before it then slams shut under braking as he heads into the right-hander of turn 1.
Yeah, nice and tidy through there. Of course, that outlap was a little bit of an exploratory one, just finding out exactly how much grip you've got. We talked about earlier about the curbs holding onto water. He's got to test that on his outlap so that now he can fully commit and really go for it, and that's exactly what he's doing. Early part of the lap looks nice and tidy. His first sector is reasonably good, I think. He's coming into the middle sector now. Hasn't had any twitches or corrections on the steering wheel, so very much under control. We'll get to see as he comes towards the end of the lap whether that delivers lap time or whether he was just leaving a little bit on the table. unstable, but nice and tidy so far.
Past the scene of the crime where Sergio Perez slid off into the wall at turn 8, makes it safely through there, through that middle sector, which is essentially one big corner that arcs left and right before you then get to that short burst of straight, which allows you a little bit of breathing time before you get to that right-hander of turn 12. Again, looking neat and tidy for Carlos Sainz, a 26.928 in the middle sector, as he has one final corner to go, now being joined on track by Hamilton, Verstappen, Hülkenberg and Bottas. To the line length for Carlos Sainz, a 1:17.028, his opening gambit in Q2.
Yeah, so not bad, but definitely not quick enough, really, and it'll be much more time to come. It's about half a second off what they were doing at the end of FP3 this morning when it was completely dry on those soft tyres. So a little bit more lap time, I'm sure, to be had from the Ferrari. Others now joining him out on circuit. We've got the likes of Hamilton, Verstappen, Hülkenberg as well, the Aston Martins, Valtteri Bottas, even Kevin Magnussen now rolling out of the garage, all on out laps, preparing the tyres, getting things up to temperature, making sure brakes are in the right temperature window as well, and just getting everything set for that one flyer where they really get to test these conditions in their cars. There's about 11 minutes, just over 11 minutes left on the clock. This is Q2, of course, to decide who will go through into Q3 and fight for those all-important top 10 positions.
And that's the voice of the former McLaren mechanic Mark Priestley, alongside myself, Harry Benjamin. Just the one remaining Mercedes now left in qualifying after George Russell eliminated in Q1. Lewis Hamilton remains. Indeed, this was the track where he took pole position here last year, his last pole that he managed to achieve, and he's just about to cross the line now and head down towards turn 1 on his first flying lap. Verstappen out there too, Hülkenberg and Box through his flying lap, along with Valtteri Bottas as well. But Hamilton looking to be a 9-time winner around the Hungarian come the end of Sunday afternoon. He achieved that feat in Silverstone. Could it be back-to-back wins for Lewis Hamilton? Could it be back-to-back pole positions for Mercedes? Bit of traffic for Hamilton as he comes through turn 4, just has to avoid Yuki Tsunoda in front of him. Manages to get around the Japanese driver, clouts over the chicane and into the middle sector.
Yeah, I think that might have just compromised Lewis Hamilton as he came across the back marker and had to. It wasn't a major correction, didn't have to really avoid him too much, but I think it will have hampered him. He's coming through the final sector. Having said that, he's just gone quickest in the middle sector, so maybe not hampered him too much. Through the final couple of turns, then down towards the big sweeping left-hander. That's 13 into 14. The final corner he goes. Hard on the brakes. You've got to feather the throttle out of it. It's a long right-hand corner. You really want to bury that throttle, get back onto that start-finish straight. He does so, and he crosses the line. Just about half a second quicker than Sainz. Fastest time so far, 1:16.5.
Tell you what though, Max Verstappen is going quicker. He is absolutely flying. Fastest of anybody in the first sector. Fastest of anybody in the middle sector. And to the cheers and the roar of the Dutch army on the main grandstand, Verstappen goes fastest into the 1:15s. A 1:15.770 for the Dutchman. That was a mighty lap from Max Verstappen.
Yeah, that is by far the quickest lap we've seen all day. We often talk about Verstappen not running their engines, or Red Bull not running their engines at full power throughout the whole of the practice sessions, just to save some of the longevity, the lifespan of those engines. They learn about the performance of the car, knowing that when they turn the engines up, they just gain 3, 4, 5, 6 tenths sometimes, and that's what we've just seen there. Great lap from Verstappen, a 1:15.7.
Tell you what though, Piastri has found more time in the middle sector and is the closest man so far to Max Verstappen. Piastri slots into second, just 100th of a second behind Verstappen. Alonso in the Aston Martin slots into third ahead of his teammate Stroll. Hamilton is fifth, Magnussen sixth ahead of Sainz. Bottas, Sargent slots into ninth, Hülkenberg into the top 10, and still waiting for times from Albon, Tsunoda, Leclerc, Norris and Ricciardo. All of them are out on track with the exception of Daniel Ricciardo, still in the pits.
Yeah, and if we get no more rain, which is looking like that's going to be the case, this circuit should get quicker and quicker and quicker as the session rolls on. Any sort of washing away of rubber, it wasn't very heavy rain, so we may not have had too much, but the greasiness that's been on the track, that'll all disappear, the new rubber will go down, the temperatures begin to rise, and lap times should start to tumble. So once again, you're going to want to be on track right towards the end of this session. We've still got just under 8 minutes to go. It's Verstappen from Piastri from Alonso at the moment, the top three.
And then Norris has just come across the line in fourth. Charles Leclerc's first lap time on the board, rounds the final corner. Personal bests for him. Well, it is his first lap, so it would be, but he's 6/10 down overall on Verstappen. Slots his Ferrari into fifth spot. So I think, well, I was about to say, I think Ferrari are a little bit down, but saying that, Carlos Sainz has just gone fastest of anybody in Sector 1.
Yeah, I think this circuit evolution is going to continue to the point where everybody is going to keep getting quicker and quicker laps. You're going to get these banker laps in, and now everybody's starting to now peel back into the pits, having had their first exploratory laps. Carlos Sainz, don't forget, was the very first man out at the beginning of this session, so slightly out of sync with everybody else. This is now his second flying lap run. He is going quickly, but he's out of sync with everybody else. So he'll be able to get back into the pits and prepare for a third run if necessary, and I'm sure that's what he'll have to do. But we are seeing a lap time there. It's third on the timesheet so far from Sainz, so 1:15.8, so about a tenth slower than Verstappen. A decent lap, but I'm still sure there's more to come.
Yeah, Piastri, the closest man to Verstappen at the moment, hearing that he set that lap on used tyres as well, along with his teammate Lando Norris. But Norris not as close to Piastri, 4 tenths between them. Norris down in fifth, and it's Leclerc, Stroll, Hamilton, Magnussen and Tsunoda rounds out the top 10. Bottas is 11th, Sargent 12th, Albon 13th, Hülkenberg 14th, 1.4 seconds splitting the top 14. No time from Daniel Ricciardo on the board yet. He hasn't even ventured out so far in this session, just biding his time perhaps. Or is there a little bit of work going on in that RB garage?
Well, if you're Daniel Ricciardo, you're probably pretty happy with the balance of the car. He put in the fastest lap time in Q1. Maybe he's content. He knows the circuit is going to continue to evolve and get quicker and quicker. He doesn't want to spend more time on track than he needs to. There's risk attached to that. Maybe he wants to save tyres as well. Maybe he's confident enough to be able to just go out towards the end of this session when he thinks the circuit's at its best and give it one big blast.
He does have a affinity with this circuit. That spectacular win back in 2014, hunting down Fernando Alonso in those last few laps. A three-time podium finisher here as well is Daniel Ricciardo. And right now, though, 15th and last with no time on the board. Just over 5 minutes then remaining. And we get that lull now on track after those opening gambits from the 14 drivers that have ventured out onto the circuit. Right now, though, it is Max Verstappen who is looking the quickest of them all in a Red Bull that is heavily upgraded for this weekend. But we only have one Red Bull left in the frame, with Perez crashing out in Q1, and only one Mercedes left after George Russell caught out in Q1 with the mixed conditions and perhaps not enough fuel in the tank of that Mercedes to allow for him to be on track at the right time. He also fell the way of Q1.
Yeah, and those moments like that give hope to the midfield runners, because we've got a sort of breakaway group of 4 clear teams in the likes of Red Bull, McLaren, Ferrari and of course Mercedes, who on their day should lock out the top 8 positions. And then you've got the rest scrabbling over the remaining 2 slots in the top 10. Well, now we've lost 2 of those major contenders. We've lost Perez, we've lost Russell. There's now 4 slots outside of the top 4 teams that are available. So from P6 downwards, it's all to play for. And for the likes of Williams, for the likes of Bottas and the Sauber, maybe even Hülkenberg and the Haas, those are real opportunities that they will want to exploit today.
Yeah, and just hearing from George Russell, who's been speaking post-qualifying, saying it was 2 factors that did it for him. The first lap wasn't good enough in the beginning, and the next one, we didn't have enough fuel to complete the session. It was a disaster from both aspects. We should have got through from the last lap, but we didn't have enough fuel. And there really is nothing he can do about that. That is a team mistake.
That's true. I mean, you don't know what conversations have gone on, but let's assume it was the team decision. But it does mean that the one opportunity he had before that, if he says he's made mistakes on that lap, he should have made that one count as well. It's all ifs, buts and maybes, isn't it? And when the circuit's changing like it was so quickly in Q1, you don't get second chances, whether you're a team or a driver. You've got to get it right.
Well, F1 spelt backwards is if, isn't it? One big if, this game, kind of. if you squint. 3 minutes remain of Q2, and the traffic jam is well and truly in full flow. Nico Hülkenberg trying to merge into the fast lane, but Charles Leclerc is having absolutely none of it and muzzles his way through. Of course, there is a rule: if you have your front wing over that white line before the car gets there, you do have right of way. And talk about fine margins. The garages are a little bit tight here, Mark, but we've just seen a replay of one of the Ferraris leaving the garage, and I think you could fit about a paper, not even a piece of paper through the gap between the right rear tyre and the wall of the garage for the Ferrari there.
I mean, how embarrassing would that have been if you knocked your right rear corner off just trying to emerge from the garage? Anyway, he lived to fight another day. Here's Hülkenberg.
We're getting done here. This is taking too long.
He's that impatient guy trying to get out of the slip lane onto the motorway where no one wants to let him in. He's trying to emerge from his garage, but of course everybody else just wants to be on circuit, and they want to have control over where they sit in the whole space around this circuit. So no one's going to freely let him in. It's not there's no politeness in Formula One. It's all about competitive, fights. So yeah, he's a bit frustrated there.
He has finally got out, but he's had to let Stroll, Verstappen, Bottas they've all got in front of him. Hülkenberg finally they're able to merge onto the pit lane and out onto the circuit. But we're getting done here, is what he said, and that'll be because he'll have one eye on the clock, because we've got a minute and a half left. Of course, everyone heading out there on their outlaps, trying to find their own gap with clean air in front of them. Whilst maintaining that, they want to get their tyres up to temperature. They need to make sure they've got full battery power for their flying final run, which it will be. And Hamilton and Stroll out there at the moment managing to get their laps in before they come across the carnage. Hamilton actually losing time in the middle sector. At risk, Tsunoda is 10th, Bottas, Sargent, Albon, Hülkenberg, Ricciardo does venture out onto the circuit. They all need to improve to find themselves battling inside Q3 at a top 10 position for tomorrow's Grand Prix.
Yeah, absolutely. So Stroll going quick. He's on a flying lap at the moment. Hamilton, I think, going a bit quicker. Hamilton down in 7th. So no, he didn't really improve. We are going to see, I think, a similar situation. We've got 30 seconds on the clock. There are going to be one or two people, I think, because of all the bunching up in the last two corners where people are trying to create gaps, you might find that one or two don't make it again.
Albon slots up to 9th in his Williams. Charles Leclerc ends the second sector, very close to Max Verstappen, just a couple of hundredths off. Sargent gets himself up into the top 10. Daniel Ricciardo was putting in some decent lap times as well. He just slots up into 6th in the RB. That puts Norris down to 7th. Then it's Hamilton, Leclerc, Albon, currently the top 10. Leclerc finding time across the line, puts himself up into 4th behind his teammate Sainz. Verstappen, Piastri currently the fastest, so we see what Logan Sargent will have. He won't get another go at this. What about Kevin Magnussen? He's out there at the moment and finding decent time in sector 1. Yuki Tsunoda coming into the final sector now is finding time. So too is Valtteri Bottas, so too is Nico Hülkenberg, but Lando Norris also finding time, the most of any as it currently stands with a checker flag out. He goes to the top of the timings, a 1:15.5, Norris fastest.
Yeah, and actually I wonder, Lewis Hamilton currently in P9, but everybody behind him going more quickly than him. He could well find himself in trouble here because he's not going to get another flying lap in.
Hamilton's going to fall down to 10th. He does, because Tsunoda gets up into 8th. Could Mercedes end up not having any car inside the top 10? Hamilton comes into the pits. Albon's not going to do it. Sargent won't. We look to Magnussen, Bottas or Hülkenberg to knock Hamilton outside of the top 10. The checkered flag is out. Valtteri Bottas will round the final corner. Can the Sauberman demote his former teammate? No, it's only 11th for Bottas. But what about the Haas of Hülkenberg? Can he do anything about it either? No, he can't. It's only 11th. Can K-Mag do it? No, he can't either. And by the skin of his teeth, it's Lewis Hamilton who does just stay inside that top 10 and makes it through into Q3. But it did get it got rather tense though for the Mercedes garage there in those dying moments of Q2. But in the end, it's Nico Hülkenberg who finds himself out in 11th, ahead of Valtteri Bottas, the two Williams of Alex Albon and Logan Sargent, with Kevin Magnussen 15th.
Yeah, and that really was by the skin of his teeth for Hamilton, because Magnussen was on a lap that was very quick in the early part of the lap. His middle sector was also fast. He was on course to knock Hamilton out, and it was only the final sector that Magnussen lost a bit of time, and that was what saved him. Hamilton's lap was in a replay. That's the sound you can hear. Hamilton's lap was a bit scrappy, which is why he didn't improve and found himself in that position, but he gets away with it. He sails through just about into Q3, and he'll get to have a shot at a decent position inside the top 10.
10 thousandths of a second between Hamilton and Hülkenberg for a Q3 appearance. Ultimately, it goes the way of Lewis Hamilton. Nico Hülkenberg just missing out again. He could have made it. Yet another top 10 appearance. It would have been 3 consecutive Q3 appearances for Nico Hülkenberg. Alas, he'll have to settle for 11th. Bottas just behind in 12th.
That's all I got.
Did he say that's more like it?
He said that's all I've got.
Oh, that's all I've got.
And actually, he was only 77 thousandths behind Bottas, behind Hülkenberg as well. So it was very, very close between Hamilton, Hülkenberg and Bottas. And as you say, Hamilton the one to escape from Q2 and make it into Q3, but there wasn't a lot between them.
Yeah, 0.77 seconds Bottas was behind Hülkenberg. And Bottas driving with the number 77. Here's Sargent.
Traffic's a joke. Honestly, no one moves.
And that was Logan Sargent, very upset with the traffic then on one of his final runs. But I tell you what, it's not a half bad qualifying from Sargent, who is within a tenth of his teammate Albon, who's only just up the road in 13th. And
actually, throughout the qualifying session, on a number of points where we've frozen the timesheets, he's been ahead. So actually, it has been a pretty decent showing, and that's probably why he's so frustrated. He feels like this might have been one of those rare occasions when he might have been able to out-qualify Alex Albon. That doesn't happen very often, so when an opportunity like that passes you by because of what you think is someone else getting in your way, it must be so frustrating.
Well, as we enter that interim period before we get ready for the final part of qualifying, the battle for pole position, the top 10 shootouts, we'll have 2 McLarens of Norris and Piastri, 1 Red Bull of Max Verstappen, 2 Ferraris of Sainz and Leclerc, 1 Mercedes of Hamilton, 2 Aston Martins, Lance Stroll and Fernando Alonso. And you know what? I'm a bit surprised.
Me too, because actually the Lance Stroll lap, which is the one I was following, was actually a really strong lap. As the conditions got better and better, he nailed it. He absolutely got it right. He's out, so far quicker than his teammate Alonso. Great for the team, and it is surprising because we've been talking constantly about that team struggling in the group that they're fighting with. Great for RB as well, both drivers inside the top 10. A chance, we talked about it, Sergio Perez under massive pressure at Red Bull. And all the talk is about who might replace him. If they want to shuffle their drivers around at the midway point at the summer break, could it be a Tsunoda or a Ricciardo that ends up finding their way into the top team? Well, showings like this will really help their case.
Yeah, well, at the moment, they ended that session, Tsunoda 8th, Ricciardo 9th. Tsunoda's actually on a bit of a rough patch of qualifying, hasn't managed to start a Grand Prix inside the top 10 since Canada, but neither has Ricciardo. Ricciardo's best qualifying since Canada, where he did qualify a sensational 5th, has been 11th in Austria, whereas Tsunoda has done a best of 13th since Canada, and that was last time in Silverstone. But RB clearly finding a little something around this circuit. They've got a couple of updates to the front corner and the rear corner of that car. Aston Martin bringing a lot of updates, as we've been talking about throughout the practice sessions, and so far paying dividends.
Yeah, it's a circuit that throws up a whole different set of challenges to some of the others that we've been to recently. The much more high-speed racetracks of places like Montreal, even Austria, although it's a short circuit, a short lap, much higher speed. So this is a really high, almost maximum downforce track. People talk about it being a little bit like Monaco in some degree, where there's lots of slower speed to medium speed corners. You are looking at almost max downforce on the car, so you're really relying on the aerodynamics to give you all of the grip you need to hang on through these corners, and that will show up different strengths and weaknesses in different teams and different cars than we've seen in recent times, and that's why we're getting this sort of slightly shuffled order.
Well, session will get going, Q3 at 16:59 local time, so just under a couple of minutes time then. All the drivers remaining in that session, just still sitting in their cockpits, getting a bit of cooling from their fans. Temperature at the moment, air temperature 24.7 degrees, track temperature just over 31 degrees. That rain that we had at the start seems to have dissipated now and made for an absolutely intriguing beginning to qualifying. But it is the usual suspects who end up in the top 10, although the big hitters to fall. George Russell in the Mercedes, and indeed Sergio Perez in the Red Bull, with a big shunt for that car in Q1, ultimately bringing out the red flag and then not able to get out again, and that saw the end of his qualifying. Ended up down in 16th once we got the session back underway. And while the Red Bull fans in the grandstands might be looking a little bit miserable, certainly the Perez ones, the Verstappen fans, there is quite a Dutch contingent in Hungary. Very happy indeed. And if you are listening to techno music or heavy drum and bass, you won't have to look too far to find the Dutch Max Verstappen fans. No. It's their calling card almost. They
are out in force, and it's their man, Max Verstappen, who leads his way out of the garage, as a lot of them do now, finding their way down the pit lane. The clock ticks over, the green light goes on at the end of the pit lane. We are underway for Q3, with everybody now filing out on the soft tyres. Now this is where things really count. And yesterday you could look at the practice sessions and say we had a sort of much more normal service resuming, where we had a Verstappen versus Norris, for example, McLaren versus Red Bull. But what we have got today is much cooler temperatures, both the ambient temperature lower, there's a lot of cloud cover over having had the rain, but the track temperature wildly lower than it was yesterday, and that has a big impact on how the tyres and therefore the cars behave.
So make that lack of a toe count, Max.
Make that lack of a toe count is what Giampiero Lambiase, Max Verstappen's race engineer, reports to him on the radio. And I'm assuming that means a lack of Sergio Perez in the top 10.
Well, Verstappen's the first man out on circuit, so he's got nobody in front of him towing him round, but I think he's also perhaps too far ahead of Piastri to be able to give him a tow from behind. So this is a case of Verstappen having a clear track, make it count, because the circuit, as we know, can get very congested. There are only 10 cars in this particular session, but it's a short track, and in the last sector where we've got two slow corners leading onto the start-finish straight, things can get busy. So Max with the circuit to himself effectively, and they want him to make that count.
And also, according to the weather alerts, more rain expected in about 5 minutes. So halfway through this session, with less than 10.5 minutes now on the clock remaining. If that rain is serious enough, well, everybody will be heading out straight away. Here's Alonso on the radio.
The second run could be affected by rain, so this could be the one.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Took the words right out of my mouth. Max Verstappen embarks on his fly into the braking zone for turn one, slings it in to the right-hander. He's got Lance Stroll in front of him. The Canadian gets nicely out of the way as he gets the second dose of DRS down towards turn two. Downhill braking. It's a long, sloping left-hander before you come back at yourself. Then it's a quick jink right towards the uphill blind left-hander of turn four. So easy to run out wide and hit those aggressive curbs and find yourself unsettled. Verstappen nice and tidy round the right-hander of turn five before he hits the braking zone for the chicane of 6 and 7.
Yeah, decent so far. He just missed the apex at turn one just by half a metre or so as he turned in there at very high speed, but the rest of the lap's been tidy. He has got a completely clear track in front of him, negotiated a couple of back markers early on, but not causing him any trouble whatsoever. Nobody now. A very clear run to the flag. The middle sector looked decent. He's coming now into the final couple of corners, into turn 13, which is so easy to lock the front tyres. You're braking and turning at the same time. Out of the corner, onto the throttle, into turn 14, the final corner, and he'll make his way back onto the start-finish straight and stop the clock.
Lando Norris gets nicely out of his way as Norris gears up for his lap, but Verstappen to the line then, a 1:15.555, the fastest time, the first time on the board, and he immediately moves over to the right-hand side to get out of the way of Lando Norris. Oscar Piastri crosses crosses the line next. Fastest of anybody in the final sector, but 3/10 off Verstappen. Piastri second, Sainz in the Ferrari slots into third.
And that is what Max Verstappen does. He turns it on when it matters. When the pressure is really on, that's when he delivers. He doesn't make the mistakes that his teammate consistently makes. He absolutely nails it when it matters. You get one chance at moments like this. We've heard this rain coming. Verstappen's done it. 3/10 quicker than Piastri, and at the moment, nobody able to match it. If that rain's coming, this could well be pole position that we're seeing right now.
Lando Norris is flying though in the middle sector. Sainz is up into fifth. Make that sixth because Alonso just slots up into fifth. Lando Norris, though, we say Verstappen has put a blinder of a time. Norris is currently set to pip it. Fastest of anybody in the middle sector. Round the left-hander of turn 13. One more corner to go for Lando Norris as Yuki Tsunoda puts his RB into seventh. This is the sound on board the McLaren with the British racer to the line. Provisional pole for Lando Norris. 3/10 clear. A 1:15.227 for Norris puts him top of the pile.
Wow, and that was a lap. 3/10 over Verstappen. Unbelievable stuff. It's been nip and tuck between those two in the last couple of rounds, particularly in qualifying day. And at the moment, with 7 minutes left on the clock, but the potential threat of rain coming, it's Norris who holds the cards. Unbelievable.
Stroll is going to be the last man to set the first lap time. It's actually a decent lap from the Canadian with rain apparently in 1 minute. Stroll goes 8th fastest, actually lost time in that final sector. His teammate is Alonso in 6th. Weather alert, rain in 1 minute. Verstappen reporting a light drizzle. Is it going to be light enough to not make an impact? Verstappen is straight back into the garage. The tyres come off and they put a fresh set on.
Yeah, so whereas normally you'd sit in the garage now, you'd wait and let the clock run down, wait towards the end of the session. They can't afford to do that now. They either go straight back out, hoping that this very light drizzle doesn't affect things too much, or you think this is going to be a very brief shower and try and gamble and wait. With 6 minutes or so left, that seems like a really tough call to make.
Just seeing a replay of Piastri making a slight mistake, having to correct his car, the rear sliding out from underneath him on the exit of turn 1. That could well have cost him those few tenths that have put him back in third for the time being. Lando Norris makes his way back to the pit lane, but as it currently stands then, with just over 6 minutes remaining, it's Norris in provisional pole ahead of Verstappen, Piastri third, Charles Leclerc is fourth, then it's Hamilton in fifth ahead of Alonso, Sainz is seventh, Stroll, and then it's Tsunoda ninth, Daniel Ricciardo rounds out the top 10.
And we are seeing cars rush straight back out. So coming in, very quick change of tyres, splash of fuel if needed, and get straight back out before these conditions worsen. The big question is going to be the little bit of drizzle that's falling now. Is that enough to compromise lap time, or is there still enough temperature in the track? Is there still enough grip to improve on what we've seen so far, which is an amazing lap from Lando Norris at the top?
Could it be advantage those literally heading out of the pit lane now, disadvantage those only just coming in to the pit lane? That includes Lando Norris, Leclerc, Alonso, Stroll, Tsunoda, Ricciardo. Out go Piastri onto the track, Hamilton, Sainz as well, all making their way around the circuit on their outlaps ahead of trying to get maybe one final flyer in these relatively dry conditions. But a little glance down the pit lane and you can see that the rain is slowly beginning to fall. It's been light all day so far, continues to be so, but that can have a big impact in one sector or all three.
Yeah, it's not just the grip as well, it's about lowering the temperature of the circuit. As the rain falls, it means you've got cloud cover, you're not getting sunlight, the temperatures begin to drop, and that affects how the tyres interact with that tarmac as well. That all changes the behaviour of some of these cars. So we've got 4.5 minutes left to go. We're about to find out exactly what kind of conditions we've got. It looks dry enough, but that's not necessarily the whole story.
Charles Leclerc waiting for the all clear to get sent out from his garage. The team just biding time to send him out at the right moment to make sure he's got space on track. Gearing up then for his first flyer, or his first flyer in this part of the session with 4 minutes over, is Oscar Piastri down towards turn 1. Let's see if he's slipping and sliding at all. No, keeps it nice and tidy, doesn't make the same mistake he did on his first flyer. Out through turn 2, get that second dose of DRS before he breaks into the left-hander of turn 2 as Alonso reports very light rain in the pit lane.
Yeah, so good start from Piastri to the lap. He's flying up the hill through the blind left-hander of turn 4. Now that must be so terrifying in these kind of conditions, but through he goes. It all seems nice and dry all through this part of the lap. Grip levels seem to be high. Piastri's going quickly. It's the fastest first sector of anybody, and his middle sector is matching that as well. So the McLaren working very well. Carlos Sainz going quicker in the Ferrari. The track's getting quicker and quicker.
Last over the line once again, Oscar Piastri, who doesn't have a Grand Prix pole position to his name, trying to fight his teammate who currently sits in that provisional pole spot, but they've all got to look at each other. Verstappen finding more time than anyone in Sector 1, Sainz improving in Sector 2 as well. So too is Piastri round the final corner to the line for Oscar Piastri, DRS wide open. It's enough for second, fastest of anybody in the final sector, but he can't pip his teammate, less than half a tenth of a second between them. What can Carlos Sainz do? He'll be the next one. Has to have a couple of bites at the cherry though, turning it into the final corner. That'll lose him a bit of time. It's enough for fourth for Sainz, but what about Max Verstappen? Fastest of anybody in the first sector. Lost a bit of time in that middle sector. Rounds the final corner now. Can Verstappen make his mark in Hungary to the top of the times? For Max Verstappen, it is not so. Only enough for third, less than half a tenth, as there is a yellow flag and a big shunt for the RB of Yuki Tsunoda on the exit of turn 6. That is it. Red flag for the RB. The clock is stopped at 2 minutes and 13 seconds. Tsunoda reports on the radio that he's okay. He's taken quite a shunt though. Norris and Piastri currently lock out the front row. Verstappen managed to get his lap time just in the nick of time to put himself up into third.
But importantly, the clock has stopped, and that means there's time for another run. Everybody can get back to the pits, bar of course Tsunoda, whose car is an absolute wreck. With 2 minutes on the clock, if they get this cleared up, one out lap, just in time to cross the line with fresh tyres on, you will get one more shot at a flying lap here. So the lap times we're seeing right now, the order we've got, Norris, Piastri, Verstappen, is not necessarily the way it's going to finish here.
This is the sound of Yuki Tsunoda there, and this is the big shunt through the left-hander of turn 4. All fine through there, then slings it into the right-hander of 5, runs out wide, and he flies through the air over the AstroTurf. The front left hits the wall.
Okay, something happened. Sorry.
As he skids down the grass and takes a fair bit of the advertising hoarding with him. The rear wing hanging on for dear life. The front end completely ruined. Side impact on the left-hand side of that RB kicks up all sorts of grass and dirt onto the racing line. And that rear left tyre completely detaching as well from the car. That is going to take a bit of time to clean up.
Well, between Red Bull and their sister team RB, there's an awful lot of work and spare parts required this evening. Between Perez's crash earlier on and Tsunoda's now, we keep coming back to this sort of driver market and the merry-go-round, particularly within the Red Bull camp. If you're Yuki Tsunoda, that's the last thing you needed as well when you're trying to make a claim for a seat at the top table. Daniel Ricciardo's sitting there rubbing his hands together because there'd be nobody left.
You're only as good as your last race in Formula One, aren't you? How quickly things can turn around for drivers. But look, Tsunoda is out of the car, currently 9th fastest, and was looking at improving his lap time on that run. Gets collected by the safety car, and already the marshals straight to work in clearing up the damage down there, heading towards the chicane. Norris on provisional pole ahead of Piastri. Then it's Verstappen, who couldn't improve enough to challenge Norris or indeed get himself between the McLaren. Sainz 4th, Hamilton 5th, and of course some of those laps would have been scuppered by the yellow flag eventually turning to red. Leclerc 6th, Alonso 7th, Stroll 8th, Tsunoda 9th, and now out with Daniel Ricciardo 10th.
And one of the big questions here is who's got brand new soft tyres left? Of course, the tyres they all had on the car, they would be expecting to finish the session with those and that one flying lap they had. Yes, they may well have kept some for the race tomorrow, which they might well be willing to use up now, of course, if they think there's a chance to improve. But not everybody, I suspect, is going to have the luxury of putting another fresh set on, and that could make a big difference around here. We'll see in a moment when people start to uncover their tyres.
They are going to restart the session.
There's Lando Norris not on fresh tyres. So I think we're going to see this actually, cars, see, nobody's got enough new soft tyres to be able to make use of them. Certainly not in the two McLarens, and certainly not in the Aston Martin of Lance Stroll either. We'll see if anybody does, but that could make a big difference. We could well get this top 3, the order in this top 10, shuffled up with just 2 minutes left on the clock.
That's the sound, by the way, of Yuki Tsunoda. Well, he crashing.
It sounded like he didn't know what happened, but I can tell you exactly what happened. He ran wide, and at the end of the curb, it feels like there's a sort of concrete block before you get to the grass, where it transitions from concrete to grass, almost like a step. He was so wide and already on the grass that I think the front of the car hit the concrete and launched it into the air. I think all 4 wheels came off the ground, and he became a passenger going sideways at high speed, by the way, into the barriers. The whole left-hand side of the car damaged, so that's a big one.
And that's a big job for the mechanics in the garage to get that ready for the race.
Well, in the same way we talked about Sergio Perez potentially damaging a gearbox, it's the same thing. He went in hard with the left-hand side. As the rear wheels hit the barrier, it can easily punch the drive shaft into the gearbox and cause damage.
And we're just seeing a replay of Max Verstappen crossing the line on his last flyer around and then slamming the steering wheel. Not happy at all. It was only enough for 3rd fastest on that lap. So Verstappen frustrated, and actually he's now getting out of the car as we switch back from a replay to live pictures. Getting out of the car. It's a red flag, 2 minutes 13 stopped on the clock. We just heard from Will Joseph, who is Lando Norris's race engineer, that they will get the session restarted. Indeed, cars are lining up in the pit lane, but Verstappen getting out of the car and walking away for the time being. Helmet stays on, and we'll see if he's just quickly nipping out for...
Well, that's interesting, because if you are going out again, and the reason we've got cars in the pit lane is you need to be out quick. 2 minutes 13, yes, you can get around, you can find your way round, you know, that's way slower than a lap time, is Piastri.
Be aware that others may try and race you on the out lap, and we do want to start this lap.
Yep.
And that's exactly what I was talking about there. You need to be out on circuit the very second the light goes green. With Verstappen out of the car, either he's got a problem, or he's abandoned the session, or he broke that steering wheel. He smashed it so hard with his hand. That's my first thought whenever I see that. I think about the poor guy that puts them together in the factories. He's watching on thinking, my goodness, that's a delicate bit of equipment. But Verstappen out of the car, he's currently in 3rd place behind the 2 McLarens. This feels like an opportunity to try and improve on that, but he's taking his helmet off. He's not going to get back in by the look of it.
No, helmet off, and he's actually talking to the president of the FIA, Mohammed Ben Sulayem, and it doesn't look like he's going back out. He's out of his car. We haven't had confirmation from race control as to a time for when we get this session restarted. Indeed, there is a sea of marshals still on the track, clearing up the grass, the dirt, not to mention the bits of carbon fibre off of Yuki Tsunoda's RB and the barrier repairs as well. So there's still all sorts of pickup vehicles on the track, while everybody else, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cars are all lined up at the end of the pit lane. Tsunoda's out. Verstappen also seems like he's out.
Rain. So rain expected at 17:20, which is in 5 minutes time.
So if that's the case, have Red Bull and Verstappen just gone, it's going to rain now, there's no point, and it is raining now, there's no point in going out because no one's going to improve?
Well, it could be the case, but it's a brave move to say that now. We've seen already in this qualifying hour how quickly things can change, and if everybody else is sitting out there and you're sitting in 3rd place where you think you've got the potential to maybe be higher than that, I'd have said you want to be in that queue. Even if you don't end up needing it, you want to be out there sat in the pit lane. I mean, look, with all those marshals still across the circuit and a lot of work to repair the damage to the barriers and to clear that circuit, we could well see a scenario where Verstappen puts his crash helmet back on and gets back in. He's probably got time to do that, but he is going to struggle to find himself a decent spot on the track if they do get going again.
How bizarre. Norris, Piastri, Hamilton all sitting, waiting patiently in their cockpit. Indeed, Hamilton has taken his gloves off. Verstappen has now made it back to the garage. He's lost his helmet. He's taken his hands device off and balaclava. Back in with his cap on, talking to some of the mechanics and the engineers around the track, and then heads off with his trainer into the back room. He's done.
No tyre blankets on the car, which is the key, that they're not sending that car back out again. So that is the end of their session. We will wait to try and get an update for you. Alonso also walking down the pit lane like his game's over.
They think there's no point. They think there's no point in going back out, even though there's some blue sky up ahead, breaking out from the clouds. Piastri on the radio.
Priority here, Oscar, is on not getting any sporting infringements or penalties. So that means not excessively impeding cars in the pit exit.
Well, we've seen that happen over the years, and Piastri being told that because McLaren know they are on course for a 1-2 here this afternoon at the Hungarian Grand Prix qualifying. And qualifying is half the job done at a circuit like this, where overtaking is difficult. Indeed, 5 of the last 12 Grand Prix here have been won from pole position. 7 of the last 12 have been won from the front row.
And of course, don't forget, if it stays like this, and this is how the grid lines up tomorrow, McLaren will be the only team out of their main rivals around them that have 2 cars in the fight. Verstappen has lost his teammate, Hamilton's lost his teammate, the 2 Ferraris further back, Sainz is 4th and Leclerc down in 6th. So McLaren in a very strong position. If they can maintain this current level, having the front row locked out, and with the rains still falling down, albeit very light, it's a tall order for somebody to go and beat these times now. Things are looking good for McLaren.
Here we go then. Q3 will resume at 17:21 local time. So in a few minutes' time then, we will get this session back underway, but we will have no Fernando Alonso and no Max Verstappen, unless they have a massive turnaround now and run back to their cars.
Well, I can only assume that there's a problem with Verstappen's car, because you just wouldn't make this decision this early. I mean, when they made that decision, from what we saw with Verstappen out of the car taking his helmet off, there was at least 5 or 6 minutes still before they get going again. Anything can happen in that time. The rain could stop, and within 2 minutes the circuit could be bone dry again. So it feels to me like less of a strategic decision and more a hint of maybe some kind of problem, or they don't have tyres. For some reason they don't feel there's any hope of them improving their lap time at the moment, and third could be the best they could be. But I guess, could it get worse than that?
Well, it is not dampening the grandstand's hopes and dreams. Indeed, they are all up on their feet, still celebrating. We've got Hamilton flags, Ferrari flags, and there is a big Dutch contingent as well out on track. I mean, McLaren could be looking at their first front row lockout since Brazil 2012.
Wow.
Over a decade ago.
And it's, you know, it's not a fluke. You know, this is indicative of the team's surge in performance and their sort of strides back towards the front. We talked about it earlier on. This is where they are right now. You know, we've seen this battle emerging between Norris and Verstappen, between the drivers, but as a team, McLaren, with a very strong driver lineup, with a car that's been developed very successfully, each update they bring seems to be bringing performance, and these are the kind of results you get when you have that. So fair play to everybody down in Woking, my old team. They are, you know, they've been for a lot of time of struggling and suffering with some very poor results. This could be the beginning of something big for them. I hope it is.
And if Lando Norris can hold on to a pole position in the last couple of minutes of this Q3 session, it would make it 9 poles at the Hungarian for McLaren, tying with Mercedes for the most at this circuit. Indeed, McLaren becoming the most successful team at this circuit. 11 wins to their name, 23 podiums, 8 pole positions so far. Could they make that 9 pole positions within the next few minutes? Well, in a few seconds, the green light will come on at the end of the pit lane, and it will be Lando Norris at the head of the field. Behind him, Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes. Then comes Oscar Piastri. And the rain, light, but still coming down. Green light on at the end of the pit lane. Back underway for Q3. The fight for pole continues. Can the remaining drivers find any time? Max Verstappen has decided to call it a day early. He is out of the car and at the back of the garage, debriefing with the team. Only enough for third fastest. Could anybody pip him in these final stages as they crawl out of the pit lane, trying to find themselves a gap on the circuit? Norris, Piastri, the 2 Ferraris of Sainz and Leclerc, Hamilton, Ricciardo, and Lance Stroll also all on the circuit now. No Tsunoda, who crashed out. That was the reason for the red flag. And Verstappen, as I say, who was called it a day early, along with Fernando Alonso.
Yeah, the man who will probably see the biggest opportunity here is maybe Oscar Piastri. There was nothing between the two McLaren drivers, fractions of a second, and yet it was Piastri who's currently second. So he's got performance in that car. There's enough performance there. I'm sure he will feel that he can eke out a pole position here for Piastri. We talked earlier on about how he needs to get his elbows out and fight for his position within that team, because all the focus has been on Lando Norris in recent weeks. This could be an opportunity for Piastri to improve just one step further, and all it takes is a couple of hundredths of a second.
On that outlap, though, coming into the braking zone for the chicane, where Tsunoda slid down towards in that incident, brought so much dirt and muck and grass onto the racing line. Hamilton just went through it, and there is still a bit of dirt that was just kicked up out of the way of that Mercedes. So how much lap time can they reasonably find? It's going to be a one-lap shootout, one by one. Norris will come across the line first to start his final flyer into turn one. The right-hander will come out on exit and head his way down to turn two, DRS enabled, as he then makes his way through the left-hander.
Yeah, decent start. Keep an eye on the Ferraris, who are at the back of the field and just about maybe going to cross the line, but it is going to be very, very tight. Norris, though, well on his way through the first sector, and he hasn't improved. So at the moment, he's half a second off. So I didn't see a big mistake. Maybe that rain has just lost some of the lap time out of this circuit. Is anybody going quicker? Lance Stroll with a decent couple of sectors. Fernando Alonso improving a slight amount in the first sector. I'm not sure anyone's going to really trouble the two McLarens here, and we could well be looking at a front row lockout from the Papaya squad.
Carlos Sainz didn't make it over the line. Indeed, he went into the pits. So Sainz has called it a day. Leclerc is out there, but again, not lighting up the timing screens. Daniel Ricciardo out there too, trying to score an open goal after his teammate Tsunoda crashed out. Ricciardo trying to out-qualify Tsunoda for what would be only the fourth time this season. At the moment, it's 9-3 in Tsunoda's favour, but no one's finding time. It's not going to improve. Lando Norris peels off at the end of his lap into the pit lane, bails out of it. Piastri's not finding time either. Hamilton takes the checkered flag, doesn't improve. Stroll's not improving. Daniel Ricciardo is finding a little bit of time in the middle sector, but does he bail out of it right at the end? No, he doesn't. Ricciardo will round the final corner, and he will pip his teammate Yuki Tsunoda. He gets up into ninth. Daniel Ricciardo out-qualifies him for only the fourth time this season. But at the end of all of that then, it's a McLaren lockout in qualifying for the first time since 2012. McLaren will start 1 and 2 ahead of the Hungarian Grand Prix. Lando Norris in his second pole position of the season, with Oscar Piastri alongside, and Max Verstappen in third.
Yeah, great stuff from everybody at McLaren. A lot of hard work gone into that. The biggest of that work was done at the early part of this session, when the circuit was at its driest, in an all-out shootout between Verstappen and Lando Norris. It was Norris that came out on top, and then Piastri even pipping Verstappen as well. So that McLaren working so well around here. Verstappen potentially with a problem. We'll keep an eye on that, but didn't come out for the final part of qualifying. Not that it would have mattered anyway, but great stuff from Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri and everybody at McLaren.
Celebrations then in Parc Fermé for Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. The president of the FIA, Mohammed Ben Sulayem, there to greet them. Verstappen third, Sainz then fourth, ahead of Lewis Hamilton, who starts fifth, ahead of Charles Leclerc in sixth, Alonso and Stroll, the two Aston Martins, in seventh and eighth. Daniel Ricciardo just pips his teammate on the final lap, the only man to improve in those last 2 minutes of the session once we got restarted. Ricciardo ninth, Tsunoda 10th. And he'll start there, assuming all is well, and they're able to repair that RB in time for the Grand Prix. But stay tuned across the BBC Sport website and app for all the very latest on any post-qualifying penalties. Hülkenberg just missing out side of that top 10. But once again, magnificent work from McLaren and Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. Teamwork at its finest. They will have the best view in the house ahead of the Hungarian Grand Prix.
Yeah, really, really good. And we talked earlier on about the fact that Sergio Perez and George Russell in the Mercedes dropped out early on, opening up 2 more slots, opening up an opportunity for those midfield runners. And it was Aston Martin that took advantage of that. Fernando Alonso 7th, his teammate Lance Stroll right behind him in P8, and then the 2 RBs taking out the final 2 slots in that top 10 shootout. So when some of the big guys falter, when they make mistakes, it opens up opportunities, and they have been taken today. Good work from Aston Martin.
Less than half a tenth of a second between the 2 McLarens of Norris and Piastri. Showcasing it really is just fine margins at the moment in Formula One, and again a session that we came into really not knowing which way it was going to go, but a 3rd career pole position then for Lando Norris. Verstappen down in 3rd, and we can hear from our top 3, starting with the pole man himself, talking to Alice Powell down in Parc Fermé. Let's hear from our pole sitter. It's the McLaren driver of Lando Norris.
Lando, congratulations, another pole position to add to the list. It was so close out there, real fine margins, so you must be over the moon.
I am, yes, very, very, very happy. Not an easy qualifying, different conditions like you said, but always ending up on tops, the best part of it. Also happy, especially for the team. A 1-2 is even better to see, so congrats to the team.
McLaren are really cementing themselves as a front-running team. A lot of hard work has clearly gone on behind the scenes, and this must give you lots of confidence heading in tomorrow and for the remainder of the season.
I mean, it does, but we've already got confidence, so it's not like we need a lot more of it or we're searching for it. You know, I think we've come into this weekend and the last few happy and confident that we can do a good job, and we have a good car to fight for pole, and that's exactly what we did today. So yeah, like I said, a great job by the team. We've been improving every weekend, and to end up on pole today is sweet.
And race pace earlier on in the weekend from the long runs looked pretty decent. It's going to be a slightly different weather conditions we're expecting tomorrow, so is that going to give you confidence either in the hotter conditions?
I mean, we're in the best position for whatever the conditions throw at us, so I'm looking forward to it. 2 cars at the front row, we can control it from there, so as long as we stay where we are, we'll be happy.
So you finished P2 here last year. You're expecting to go 1 more, clearly.
I mean, I'm expecting to, so if I don't, it's not been a good day. So no, the car's doing well. I feel like I'm driving well, so it's obvious what the aim is for tomorrow.
Brilliant, congratulations.
Thank you, cheers.
Your pole sitter for the Hungarian Grand Prix, Lando Norris, speaking there. Let's hear it from Oscar Piastri.
Oscar,
next.
A big congratulations, a big cheer when you walked over to here, a big crowd of Papaya fans here. There's a lot of support for you and Lando this weekend.
Yeah, it's cool to be here, especially when you get a result like this. I think the first 1-2 in qualifying for McLaren for a very long time, so no, very happy. Of course, when I miss out by 200ths, you think of all the little things you can do a bit better, but no, an amazing result for the team. We had a bit of a tricky day on my side yesterday, so it was nice to bounce back this morning, and then obviously this afternoon in quali it wasn't easy. A lot of decisions on the fly, and yeah, to end up with both cars on the front row is an amazing result.
You said it's super close. It certainly was. Is there anything that you could have done slightly different out there? Anything sort of left on the table? Was there a small mistake along the lap?
Not really. The first lap, yes, but the second lap, honestly, it was pretty good. I've already seen where I was a little bit slower, and then you think, yeah, I could have done this a bit better, that a bit better, but no, still a good lap. I'm happy with my day's work, and it's a long run down to turn 1, so everything is still to play for tomorrow, and a lot of points are on the table.
So Lando's just in front of you. What's the mindset heading down into turn 1 tomorrow?
I mean, of course, I want to get into the lead, but yeah, we have both cars on the front row. We've got a big task ahead of us, trying to win this championship as a team, and we'll be smart. We've got a very quick car. It's been working extremely well this weekend, and yeah, we want to keep it 1-2, and I think we'll fight amongst ourselves for who gets 1.
Congratulations, Oscar, and good luck.
Thank you.
Oscar Piastri, qualifying P2, making it a front row lockout. Here's the third place man.
Well done. A bit of frustration there, though, at the end of that run. A bit of frustration over the line.
Yeah, I mean, I tried the whole weekend. I think we have been a little bit behind, And I think that was also the case in qualifying. I tried to make it as close as possible, but unfortunately, just not enough. Bit difficult to pinpoint why that is. I would have liked a bit more grip, but it's not there at the moment. But P3 is still very close. I just hope that for tomorrow, of course, the car is good in the race, and at least that we can follow them and see what we can do there.
It is very close, a lot closer than we have seen in previous years. Are you enjoying having this battle with other teams joining you for that battle for pole position?
Of course, I love competition, but I would like to be on top of the competition. And at the moment, I feel like we are chasing and having a few more difficult weekends. But, I don't back out of a fight. But, we just a bit of a tricky situation, I guess.
And it's a long race tomorrow. It's going to be a hot race tomorrow. It's hard to overtake here. Do you feel you've got the car underneath you to move forward?
Let's see. I mean, the last few races, I think, especially McLaren has been really, really good in the race, even compared to qualifying. So, of course, today was a lot colder than expected, I guess, with the clouds and a bit of the rain. Tomorrow is going to be quite a different day, and I just hope that will help us.
Great. Well done, Max.
Thank you.
Alice Powell asking the questions there to your top three at the end of qualifying for the Hungarian Grand Prix. It's a front row lockout for Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri and McLaren. Max Verstappen third, Carlos Sainz fourth, Hamilton the top five. Then it's Leclerc, Alonso, Stroll, Ricciardo ahead of Tsunoda. That's your top 10. Nico Hülkenberg starts 11th ahead of Valtteri Bottas. Then it's the two Williams of Alex Albon and Logan Sargent, with Kevin Magnussen rounding out the top 15. Sergio Perez with a crash and Q1. If they can repair that car, he's got 16th place ahead of George Russell, the big name to fall in the first part of qualifying. Zhou Guanyu 18th ahead of the two Alpines who occupy the last two spots on the grid, 19th and 20th. That brings to an end a rather chaotic qualifying, I think, especially with the weather doing its best to throw things up in the air. My thanks to the former F1 mechanic Mark Priestley. My thanks to Paddy and Pete for the expert production work. Andrew Benson as well, feeding us with all the right information. I've been Harry Benjamin, and if you are still keen to join us tomorrow, you can do so. We will be on air from 1:45 UK time ahead of the race start from 2 o'clock. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.